So Deshaun Watson has reached a settlement with the league. NFL, NFLPA, and Deshaun Watson's people have reached a settlement. 11 games, $5 million. 11 games, $5 million. And we've heard from Deshaun today. I don't think it was great in terms of meeting with the media and not having any PR person with him. I think that was not a great idea. There have been some great ideas. That was not one of them. But still, Deshaun Watson did it. Talked to the media. Here's what he said in regards to his own innocence.
I've always stood on my innocence and always said that I've never assaulted anyone or disrespected anyone, and I'm continuing to stand on that. But at the same time, I have to continue to push forward with my life and my career. And for us to be able to move forward, I have to be able to take steps and put pride to the side. And I'm going to continue to stand on my innocence and keep pushing forward. And I've always, stood on not disrespecting or sexual assaulting anyone.
This is him trying to clarify what exactly he apologized for.
I apologized beforehand. I think the second time I spoke to you guys, I actually apologized. But I think for some people, it didn't maybe register as I was apologizing. But, I just wanted to clarify, I was apologizing to all women and people that was affected about this situation because it's, it's definitely a tough situation.
This is a follow-up when he was asked what exactly he was apologizing for.
What are you apologizing for?
For everyone that was affected about this situation. There was a lot of people that was triggered.
But not the women that accused you of this?
I've apologized to all women. So anybody that was affected, even yourself, everything. So I'm apologizing to everyone that was affected about this whole situation.
Just blanket apology, I'm sorry. Which is actually a good way for a man to wake up during the day, right? You wake up and just go, man, I'm sorry. For what? I don't know. But this is obviously far more important than just the blanket dude apology in the morning. I think this is really interesting. I can play for you what Andrew Barry's saying. I can play all that stuff. But now you've heard from Deshaun Watson. You've obviously, the case. What do we make of it? I'm going to give you my opinion first, okay? Then we're going to go around the room. We get a chance. It might work in a phone call, 877-99 on Fox. We'll work on the little Twitter machine, @Gottlieb Show. We'll check out the Facebook page. That's the Doug Gottlieb Show fan page. And we'll just kind of, let's do it sort of old school, organic like. This is a big story. The first thing is that, and it's a very important distinction, okay? Settling and apologizing does not mean you did anything wrong. It doesn't. And I will agree with Deshaun Watson in what he said. I do think it's really hard, and you have to be very you have to have what's been termed to me social jujitsu, right? You have to be delicate and yet forceful. You have to use guile and positioning in order to get across what you're trying to get across, maintain a level of sensitivity while maintaining your innocence as well. Okay? So the idea is this, that settling, and it's really important, right? Settling is not an admission of guilt. Apologizing, and the way in which he apologized, is not an admission of guilt. That said, it doesn't wipe him free of suspicion or all we have in terms of documentation, or even the former federal judge who ruled in the favor of the NFL just didn't want to suspend him to this level. I think it's a win for Deshaun because if you look at things and you're neutral, you step aside, you just go, look, I'm not going to take sides on either side. Hey, forget the previous suspension of 6 games. The NFL wanted a season or an indefinite. The last point they were willing to settle on was 12 games. He got 11. That's an absolute win for Deshaun Watson. And I'll also point out, while it's going to be difficult in his first game to beat the Houston Texans, his old team, when he's got to be rusty, I do think in terms of getting out there and playing, the Texans aren't going to be as talented a team as the Browns are, and there's a chance there to put his stamp on it against the Texans This is why I didn't want to play for the organization. Look at the organization I'm playing for now. Completely have my back and have a better football team. Now, the problem with it is you sound incredibly insensitive when you just deal with sports and not deal with the social and personal issues aside. Okay, when you don't. I noticed a level of consistency from Deshaun Watson, even if others want to point out the inconsistency. I do think it was a mistake for him to go out there and try and handle this on his own. It's not that he's not bright enough. It's not that he can't handle himself. It's that in trying to use the right words at the right times and have the right answers for the right questions, that's really hard when that's not what you do for a living. Right? It's just not. Does the NFL look bad? No, I think the NFL actually comes out looking like they tried to be really strong. Do the Browns look bad? A little bit. They look like they got their guy. They're willing to do whatever it takes to fix their football team, and all that other stuff. I think goes a little bit by the wayside. They threw Dee Haslam out there to act like, well, listen, a woman is. I mean, it's purely for looks. So there's a lot to it. I think Deshaun gets a W because they were previously willing to settle on 12 games, the league was, and he got 11. He didn't sit the full season. He gets a play against the Texans. I don't think it was the smart decision to have him answer those questions all on his own. I do think he talked himself a little bit in circles, but I also understand that a settlement is not an admission of guilt, and an apology, if worded in a specific way, is also not an admission of guilt. That said, it strikes as a meaningless apology that somebody made him do and makes him seem cold and callous and disconnected, and all of it seem like BS, including the whatever psychological work and sensitivity training he's going to go through. Do I think it eliminates from our minds what we think of him as a human being? I do not. I think that's a really hard one to escape. But I would point out that Big Ben Roethlisberger, granted, it was only two different women, 2 different years, but there were reportedly a major issue with one that led to his 6-game suspension. And here we are 15 years later, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Do I think that happens to Deshaun Watson? I don't know. But I could go through player after player after player who has done something cruel, who has done something wrong, but done something in the early or middle point of their career, and you play long enough, you live long enough, and people have a tendency to either forgive or simply forget. All right, Jason Stewart, your thoughts.
Let's see. I'm less forgiving on this one. I think the NFL comes across as being the league that tried to appeal to the public and say we're going to go for as much as possible. They had the commissioner call him a serial predator, basically. But those words seem to come off a little empty today. I understand the sentiment of a settlement is that nobody walks away happy. I get this. But, I mean, did the players' union have any leverage in this situation? I don't think they've ever won a lawsuit against the NFL. The NFL seemed to me could have just implemented a penalty on this, and it just seems to me like them even settling comes off as weak. I think 11 games shows that they don't really have a lot of teeth. I think it's extra special dirty that the game that he's going to come back to happens to be in Houston so they can promote it and get as much out of his return as possible, which is really dirty to me. It was confusing today that the team came out and said that he's got a lot to work on through counseling and it's going to take time when he hasn't admitted to doing anything. What is he going to counseling for if the guy from the get-go hasn't admitted to doing anything wrong? So it's like the mixed messages. If today was about finality and clarity, which that was the two buzzwords of the day, this has been left with more questions than answers after the media access today. I really do think the NFL comes out looking weak, and I agree with you on this part. Deshaun's team won this. I mean, I think they got off easy.
Let me go to Dan Byer. Dan, your thoughts?
I think Jason said it pretty well. I agree with a lot of what he said. Calvin Ridley's got to, pick the Lions on Thanksgiving Day, and he's going to miss an entire season, and has to prove that he's rehabilitated. And so to have the NFL have the ability to suspend him for a year and to back off of that, which almost seems like an olive branch to the Players Association, I just find, I find it crazy. I think Jason said a lot of what I felt.
Okay. I think here's the perspective I do think we should have. Okay. Without any question, this is, I believe, the longest suspension, longest suspension for anything of this sort of magnitude in the NFL, although we've never had kind of this volume of it, right? So we haven't, you go back in other issues with guys and women in the league, and we're getting closer. I would also point out, like, if we're going to be fair, it's not a high bar to find a grand jury to indict somebody. Again, to charge them, to actually find them guilty is a higher bar, but to simply get an indictment in a grand jury is not seen as a high legal bar. And twice it went to the grand jury, twice they were denied the chance to indict. So, again, I'm just trying to be the voice of fairness and sit here and go, I understand how we all perceive it. Any of us, you don't have to be like girl dad like I am to have kind of the human sensitivity of going, okay, this doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like it's fair. On the other hand, if you're going to be totally fair about it, you sit there and go like, wait a second, like they couldn't get an indictment, 4 cases. I don't know how, like, just the whole thing feels like there's something to this story that we don't know, and we may never know because we've only heard basically the attorney's side and a couple of things drop from the actual case. But outside of that, like, I'm left sitting there going, I get it, but you have to have the perspective of leagues don't usually do this. Even though players aren't usually involved in something of this depth and this magnitude, leagues don't usually step in this. And the NFL, for the first time ever, can sit there and go like, look, we tried. Why did they settle? I think, like, again, if we're really, really honest, okay, we're really honest, people settle for a myriad of reasons. They don't want other things coming out. They don't want their process challenged. They don't. There's other things that get put on display when you go through an actual appeals process that even the side that feels like they're going to win doesn't want exposed. So I hear you guys, but I'm more inclined to think I thought a season was about right. I understand. I thought 6 was way too light, and at some point you just sign the deal and get it done and get a punishment levied. I know it's a win for Deshaun, but I don't think it's a huge L for the league. John Ramos, your thoughts?
I agree with you about the win for Deshaun Watson. I definitely think it's that. I also think that the NFL could have done something more, and I think they just kind of did they tried to do a middle ground. I think they thought the season was too long, but more than 6 was better. And, yeah, that whole thing about coming back at Houston, I mean, look, NFL's reality television at its best. I mean, that's kind of interesting how it just happens to fall on the Houston Texans where he comes back. The guy apologized a lot. He said the same thing over and over again. And I kind of agree with you as well. I mean, if there are legal procedures to what happens, and if he did go past those legal procedures and they couldn't find anything, then, our feelings are, do I think he did something wrong? Yes, I do. But you can't legally prove it because they went through a court system that couldn't legally prove something like that. So I'm not going to gonna try to be the bigger purveyor of wisdom from our legal court system. So, but yeah, do I think he got off and was the winner in this? I do believe that. Yes.
Had it been 12 games, it would have been the Bengals on the road. I don't know. I do wonder how much that game mattered to anybody. I do.
It was thought to be a sticking point, honestly, for all the talks that we've had over the last month when the schedule came out, that the NFL did not want him to play in Houston. They did. That was the messages that we were receiving in why the NFL was trying to settle for a 12-game, $10 million suspension. And in the end, it's 11 games and $5 million.
What a world. What a world. By the way, the other matchups that weekend, just so you know, like you're like, oh, everybody will be watching that one. Okay, so that's week 12?
13, I believe, because of the bye.
Yeah, because that was after Tampa. Obviously, they didn't want him in that Brady game, right, to take away from Brady. The other games, the Sunday night game is Dallas and Indy. You have Chargers. By the way, you have Chargers taking on the Raiders, which is another AFC game, a late AFC game. The other early games are Denver-Baltimore. That's the other CBS game. Wow, how about CBS is going to have to choose between Denver and Baltimore and Cleveland and Houston? They're going to choose Denver and Baltimore. I don't think it's even close. I feel like it looks really bad now. I don't think it'll be as big a watch as people think. At the end of the day, it's still the Texans, and we'll see what the Browns are then. In comparison to Denver and Baltimore, that one pales in comparison. And then over on the other side, you got Washington taking on New York. Ooh, that's a big one. You have Green Bay taking on Chicago. Those are Fox games, excuse me. So, I don't know. Listen, this is an open forum within reason. 877-99 on Fox. I understand where Jay Stu comes from, where Dan Beyer comes from. Ramos feels somewhere in between those two and me. I'm not all the way over I'm not sitting here defending Deshaun Watson in any way. I'm defending kind of the process and how we ended up here, right? And the fact that as much as in the very short term, we feel like, man, that guy got off. Here is a former judge who said, hey, to this point, 6 was the most that I could do and feel good about it. And then only the league was able to go back and get 5 more games, nearly doubling the suspension. So there's a way of looking at it where it seems a little bit stronger than how it's initially perceived. 877-99 on Fox. We can talk about how complicated other banks make it to redeem credit card rewards, or we can talk about how with Discover you can redeem your rewards for cash in any amount at any time. I mean, talk about amazing. Learn more at discover.com/redeem rewards. Terms apply. I'm going to see what former NFL quarterback Sean King thinks of this and how it affects the Browns' season. Can they be successful without their quarterback for 11 games? We'll get to that next. But first, BetRivers Sportsbook wants to invite you to discover the complete sports betting experience. The foundation of that experience, a massive number of betting options on nearly every regulated sporting event around the world. I mean, just ask yourself right now, how do you think the Browns play in Houston in Week 12? You don't know who's going to be healthy. You don't know anything. You just know Deshaun Watson will be quarterback now for the Cleveland Browns against his old team. Does Russ take over? Do they know him that well? Or does the lack of familiarity with how they're going to play with Deshaun Watson, does that figure in? Is Houston, like all of these things you factor in.